thing, it should not be a lecture. Second, it's not going to be my last. So, yeah. And so he gave it the complete opposite. It's not the name given by BSP, it's completely name given by him. The first conversation. Now, to tell you a little bit about Professor Ambuj Sagar. So he did his undergrad studies nowhere but from IIT itself, from mechanical department. I'm proud of it. And then he subsequently received an MS in aerospace engineering. See the change of branches. Then he received an MS in aerospace engineering. Then he went on to do his MS and PhD in polymer sciences. And then finally, he did his MS in technology and policy from MIT. And he was a senior research associate at John F. Kennedy School of Government and assistant dean for strategic planning at the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences at Harvard University before finally joining IIT Delhi back again in 2008. Now this information you can easily get from Wikipedia, and I actually quoted that only, right? But there's more to a professor. There's more to a professor than just his academic qualification. And to give you a little hint of that, I wouldn't need to give it a lot because he's going to do the same. But to give you a little hint of that, I'll share a small incident that happened like a couple of weeks ago with him, right? So I'm doing this course, Perspective on Science, Technology and Human Development with him, and we have this tutorial on Thursdays at 1 o'clock. So one Thursday, we both enter the LFC at the same time. We both smile and nod. We enter the staircase together, and then this guy says, "Okay, you should be in the class before me." And I'm like, "Okay." So when we reach the 6th floor, I'll walk a little faster and I'll enter the room before him. But no, he ran the stairs. He literally started running the stairs, and I was chasing him. I was competing him. Who reached first doesn't matter much, but that kind of gives you the hint what kind of a professor, what kind of a person he can be. So now I wouldn't really take a lot of time of yours, but I respectfully invite him to take his due stage and please share his wisdom with us.
All right, can people hear me in the back, or do you want me to use the microphone? Mic? All right. Yeah, I wanted to walk around, but that's all right. Let's do this. I mean, the point is for people to be able to hear me. Just a couple of things before I begin. This is not going to be a lecture, right? I think it's already been made very clear by Ankur that this is not going to be a lecture. So I actually insisted that it be a conversation. But I will start the ball rolling. He just said, I think you ended by saying, share my wisdom. I don't think actually I really have wisdom to share. But for the following reason, I'm more, it's one of the things as maybe you get a little bit older. As I said, it's not necessarily you get wiser, but you certainly get less clueless. Piece by piece, you begin to have a better understanding of the world, and maybe you start seeing the world a little bit differently. And I think I can say that of me. Part of what they wanted me to do, the organizers wanted me to do, is kind of just reflect on my journey a little bit. I guess because people are a little bit confused as to what's with this guy. Is he one of these people? Clearly, he was clueless once upon a time, that he moved around so much. Maybe we'll have a conversation on that, on the cluelessness, and maybe what being less clueless means. I should say that I actually have not prepared any formal remarks, and because I didn't want to turn it into one big diatribe or a big tirade of that kind. So let me just step back. Let me just step back to the days when I was at IIT as a student. Actually, when I first joined IIT, I was giving lectures in the same lecture theaters in which I had lectures a million years ago. This is certainly a much nicer room, so already I see some progress. But the fact is, in many ways, IIT has not changed much. It has changed, but not as much as I think it should have. But certainly when I was a student back here, one difference I think between me and many of you, some of you, possibly many of you, is I came here wanting to be an engineer. In fact, when I was a young kid, I really like cars. I still do, even though I've never bought a car in my life. That's what motivated me. So I decided I was going to mechanical engineering. That was my choice. I was lucky to get it. And even though I had a mixed experience at IIT, some fun classes, some not very fun classes, some fun times with classmates and hostel mates, actually mostly fun times. And but at the end, I still was into engineering. I wanted to do engineering, and I decided I was going to go into grad school. I also come from a rather academic family, so bizarrely, even when I came into IIT, everybody before me in my family, my siblings had all gone to grad school, so for me also that was clear. So for me, it was a little bit unusual. I was fairly clear I wanted to go to grad school. By the time I ended IIT, I still wanted to be an engineer. And I thought I knew exactly what I wanted. I decided I was going to go from mechanical to aerospace, as he just said, as Ankur just said. And I think I was one of the few people who really, if somebody had asked me the day I was graduating what I was going to be doing, I was pretty clear on what I wanted to do. And it was only after I actually went to the US for graduate school, it's only after I went there I really began to understand how, when you're 22 to 23 years old, when you think you know all the answers, you really don't. I actually, and I'll tell you a little bit about how I ended up changing all these different areas, because I think there was certainly a lesson in it for me. My first year, in fact, even when I applied to the aero departments, I actually said I have an interest both in propulsion and materials. I was very clear that I was trying to decide between the two. So when I first started my research there, it was in the area of propulsion, gas dynamics, but I took a class in materials because I said, I have an interest in that. And the professor was an absolutely incredible professor. He was absolutely fantastic. And I have to say that even when I was at IIT, one of my best classes was actually taught by Professor Raghavan in material science, which is, I think, the reason why I actually even thought about doing materials afterwards. But anyway, when I was in grad school, my first semester, this was such an amazing class that at the end of it, I actually went to my advisor and said, I think I want to switch. And he said, what? You've just joined. And I said, well, I've been giving it a fair amount of thought, this, that, and I really want to move. He was not very happy, but that's one good thing about good mentors. He actually said, it's not what I would do, but he tried to entice me to stay. But finally, when I said I don't want to go, he said, I can't stop you. I'll write you a letter of reference. And I then applied and moved to material science. I switched universities and moved to material science. When I joined my graduate program, I actually wanted to do biomedical materials. But you have to go where the money is. And so I got a fellowship on doing something else. But I was a little bit focused. I kind of wound my way through various structures and found myself in a program of polymer science with the intention of doing biomedical polymers. Very interested in that question of how do you, this is way back when it was just kind of becoming hot. And I started working on a problem on basically trying to develop a material that is benign to contact with blood. So basically blood contacting materials. Very early in those days of biology, biological materials and so on. I was exactly sure what I wanted to do. I started working with this advisor. He wrote a big grant with which he was going to fund me, and then the grant never came. It's like, okay, and I'm going to try to put a thread through all of these stories, because I think there are some lessons I took away from all of this in retrospect. Although at that time, I have to confess, I was not very happy. He basically said, look, you can switch to somebody else, or you can bide your time and we'll see what to do. We'll write a new proposal and all of that. And I said, okay. And I'd already done some research, but The fact is, there was no grant to pay for equipment and all of that, or more materials. So I said, let me do something else with my time in the meanwhile. I was TAing, so I didn't have any research obligations. And I picked up the course catalog and I said, yeah, well, what's interesting? I started flipping through it. One of the things in grad school is you actually don't have to fulfill many course requirements, unlike you guys, right? And I came across a program called Technology and Policy. I said, oh, that sounds interesting. And I, picked up the phone, called up the head of the program and said, I'm interested in this program. What kind of people do you take? And he said, you're already here in grad school. It's not a problem. You can enroll. But before you do that, I'd suggest you take an independent study with a professor, whether you like it or not. So he named a professor. I started working with him who worked in the area of environment. So I added another thing to my portfolio, right? I started working in environmental policy. And I kind of really began to enjoy it. I should say that I had actually some childhood friends who were big environmentalists. They were actually working with the Narmada Bachao Andolan, working with a group called Kalpriksh. So already I had some interest in the environment. So it was like, why not? It seems like an interesting area. I'm kind of interested in that anyway. The more I got into it, the more I liked it. And then along came, luckily for me, another opportunity for my advisor on a project on environment and materials. And he said, well, are you interested in that? And I was like, sure, why not? So somehow, not through any great grand plan, things came together, right? And partly it was luck that I was able to switch. And partly it was serendipity. Something disappeared, something new appeared. And part of what I think I realized is life throws things at you, and it's what you make of it. And I think I just happened to kind of move with whatever happened. And anyway, basically then ended up doing work on environment and policy and environment and polymers. Basically trying to design biodegradable materials. And then I had to make a decision, so I decided to move into policy. So it's a long winding story, and then I actually spent many years as a researcher and then came back to India. Some of the things that I take away from this story for myself. And by the way, I'm not going to be imparting wisdom to you. I'm only going to be telling you in a very compact way, my story. Some of the choices I made, and as you begin to understand why I made the choices, but also some lessons from the making of those choices. And what is it that I now take away? And by the way, when students tell me, a lot of students come to me and say, I'm not sure what I want to do. Standard question I ask them is, when they're coming and trying to figure out what they'd like to do, the standard question I ask them is, what would you like to do maybe 5 years from now? It's a tough question actually when you're 22, 23. It's not an easy question at all, but the question is intended to just provoke a little bit of thought. But to break the ice, I tell them, and it's true, even I don't know what I'm going to be really doing 5 years from now. I've moved around constantly. I actually didn't work on energy at all. When my area of interest was much more in environment. And actually when I went to the Kennedy School to do my postdoc in policy, I bumped into a person who I was trying to figure out what to do after my first year. Wasn't clear. I didn't really want to work for a company, although I had an offer. I'd been in India already after my PhD, so there was nothing here for me at that time in policy. So I really was trying to figure out what to do. I bumped into this guy, really in the coffee room, and we ended up chatting with each other. He said, "Oh, I'm just coming here as a faculty member. Would you like?" Actually, he didn't say, "Would you like to work with me?" We chatted, and I was telling some friends later that I bumped into somebody in the coffee room, and they said, "Do you know who this guy is?" And I gave the name, and they're like, "Oh, that's a guy you really should think about working with, if you're not sure which way you want to go." So I chatted with him and he said, "Sure, but I'm working mostly on energy right now." I was like, "Okay, that's an important area. I haven't done it before." The reason I'm telling you this, Actually, that's exactly what I've done. So, but the reality is, I've kept on evolving. Part of it is, I think, some kind of academic curiosity. Part of it is wanting to try new things. But part of it is actually there's a fun in learning new stuff. There's always fun in learning something new, at least for me. And I'm always trying out something new constantly. I'm always working with colleagues, hatching up new plans. They all laugh when I call up and I say, hey, I've got a new idea. And but the reality is, for many of you are thinking about which pathway to go down, what choices to make. What do I take away from, at least for myself, from this story? First of all, there is no single path that people can take, right? There is no single, and many people who are in my class, when we talk about innovation, they'll recognize this phrase, there is no single optimal, right? There's no notion of optimality that works for everyone or even works for one person. What was optimal for me when I was 25 is not optimal for me now. So something else exciting me now. And even this is not optimal. It's always about, for me at least, it's about understanding that you may change. You may evolve, your interests may evolve, and therefore being open to that instead of being rigid yourself. But in being open to that, and I think something that troubles me a lot in talking to students today is that often it seems to me that the choices they're making are choices that are driven by factors extraneous to them. What are my colleagues going to think? What are my friends going to think? What are my parents going to think? I think that, unfortunately, trying to make everyone else happy, making choices that makes other people happy may work, but I think has the potential to land you in a fair amount of trouble. Partly because it's not about yourself, and partly because all the people around you are not thinking the same way. So part of it is, who do you want to keep happy? If you are trying to keep your friends happy, well, your friends may change, and 3 years later, they may think you should do something else. So having some kind of internal compass and trying to figure out what you want to do rather than what other people should be doing, I think is an important part of that. As your interests change, as the interests of everybody else around you change, as what society thinks is correct changes, having an internal compass yourself and saying, what is that I really want to do? And having some courage, foolhardiness, whatever one calls it, to actually walk that path yourself. Where your friends may say, this doesn't not making any sense. I actually did have a friend many friends actually, but one particular one I remember, very well-meaning, one of my wingmates from IIT, who met me. He was visiting Cambridge, Massachusetts, and we met for lunch or coffee or something. And at the end of it, he said, "Can I say something to you?" I was already making this transition to policy, and I said, "Sure." And he said, "Why are you throwing away everything? You're getting a PhD in engineering from MIT. Why are you throwing that away and then going down this different path?" Right? He didn't mean badly at all. He actually meant this was for my benefit. I understood that, but the reality is, so we ended up having a long conversation. I said, I just feel that I want to do this, and it's okay. Just because I have a PhD in a particular area cannot constrain me for the rest of my life. So people do mean, people will try to exert influence on me. They mean well, but in the end, part of it is actually having your own compass on what to do. And so the flip side of no single optimal is this question of how do you navigate the world when nothing is really fixed, right? And really, again, in the world of innovation, people talk about this. The concept of learning becomes really important. How do you learn from your experiences? How do you learn from your mistakes? How do you learn from other people's experiences? And constantly learning in how to do better, right? So in a sense, it's not a static optimization. In fact, it's not an optimization at all. It's a dynamic process where you're kind of learning and reevaluating, being open to new ideas, being open to new thoughts that come up in your head, seeing where the world is going, and responding to that in ways that are meaningful to you. Meaningful to you, not meaningful to everybody else around you. Um, in the end, also, I have to say a word that's very important to me is passion. I think whatever you do, you have to be passionate about it. Doing things just for the sake of checking off boxes, again, because somebody else told you, positions of responsibility are important. Building resume is important. Having extracurricular activities is important. Having a really high GPA is important, whatever people tell you, right? In a matter of speaking, I think it really is, in the end, one has to figure out what one is passionate about and be driven by that. I think that's the part also in explorations, is things that have to excite you. You have to be driven by that. Yes, sometimes you'll have to take risk. But the reality of the world is risk and reward are correlated, right? It's like the person from my bank who calls me up, again, real stories. The person from my bank who calls me up and says, "Sir, you have some money sitting in your account. I think you should invest it." I said, "Well, not really. I don't want to do all the thinking about, which investment has what risk profile." She's like, no. Actually, this is very high return and no risk. And so I told her, I said, "How does that work?" I said, "I'm not a finance person, but even I know that if you had an instrument that would give you high return without risk, everybody would be in there, right? So it just can't be. And by the way, as people pile into that, the risk would change, even if that existed. So the reality is, in the real world, you don't get rewards without risks. If you want to follow your passion, if you want to really say, I want to have a fruitful life, a life that I'm going to enjoy, a life that's going to bring me pleasure in whatever brings you pleasure, whether it's money, or whether it's professional success, or whether it's an impact, if you want to be a social entrepreneur, whatever it is, what you want to do, if you want to follow your passion, you have to take some risks. You have to take some risks. By the way, the kind of risk you can take also changes over time. When you're young, you may be able to take different kinds of risks. As you get older, you're able to take different kinds of risks, right? You're still young. I keep on telling students, 1 or 2 years is really nothing at this stage. If you want to try something out, 2 years is not really a big risk, right? Go and try it out. At the end of it, you can always go back to whatever you think that excited you, right? At this time is not, spending some time to explore your interests is really not particularly a risky enterprise. You should be able to take that risk. For somebody like me who's a little bit more advanced in my career, I can take different kinds of risks, right? I can actually say, hey, I'm going to try out a completely different area, because part of it is not early in my career where I actually have to build some kind of a track record, right? So the kind of risks people can take also change over time, but the reality is, if you don't take risks, you're not going to have a very fun time. What else did I want to say? Okay, another very important point that I did want to mention. A lot of what I've learned is from two kinds of people. I've had absolutely fantastic mentors. I've had the good fortune to work with people who are absolutely amazing. People with great experiences, but not only people with great experiences, people who have also given me great advice over the years. By the way, you still give me advice. I still have mentors, as I said, with great experience. So if I'm actually thinking about something, I still call them up and say, what do you think? Actually, now they're more my friends, but still they've had way more experience than me. And for me, actually, I value the ability to call up somebody and get advice from them. So certainly over my career, I've had the good chance to be able to have people around me who can give me advice, and also have asked them for advice, right? Sometimes it also, you may look a little bit silly in asking for going with questions, but get advice. The other group of people that I think has been absolutely amazing for me are my peers. For me, in fact, when people say, think about their career choices and are trying to decide between options, I always ask them, what is your peer group going to look like? Because I think in the end, you are going to be learning constantly from your peers. interacting with your peers, you're going to be learning together, you're going to be growing together. Even I, at this age, am still learning and growing in conversations with my peers, as I think so are they. And so to me, that's again a very, very important part of a life journey. It's making sure that you're able to engage with people, both senior and your own cohort, from whom you're learning. And by the way, I should say, it's not that I even learn from my students. My students may come up and say things to me that force me to rethink some of my assumptions. Unfortunately, I think students are not that, don't so commonly challenge faculty members or their seniors. I think, if I understand correctly, actually some of you or many of you even refer to your fourth year colleagues as sir. That itself tells me that hierarchy, if it exists, it already tells me that it's an issue. So I think part of it is really learning how to engage with other people and thinking about that engagement always being a source of new ideas, new ways to think about things, and actually sometimes even inspiration. So anyway, so I think I'll leave it there in terms of journeys and choices. As I said, I didn't want to turn this into a lecture, but what I really want, for me, what would make this successful is if you get lots of questions, lots of interactions, and questions that actually even maybe, as I said, make me rethink some of the things or make me kind of, refine some of my thinking. But certainly, I think the intention is to have an interaction which turns out to be fun for all. So let me stop with that, and let's have an interaction for the next however many, minutes, hours, or whatever. Yeah? Okay. Let's stop with that. Yeah.
Sir, how do you...
Sir?
So, how did you balance your personal life with all these juggling through disciplines throughout the years?
What does juggling have to do with, juggling of disciplines have to do with juggling your personal and professional? I mean, you just find time you give to things that you enjoy. And so I have lots of friends, I socialize a lot. I mean, it's important to me, right? So when things are important to you, you find time for them. When I was in grad school, I used to cycle and run a lot. I enjoyed that, right? I enjoyed going out in nature. Why would I deprive myself of that, right? So in some sense, the juggling comes very naturally if you're enjoying things. It becomes a burden when one thing is painful and the other thing is not. By the way, don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like everything has been a bed of roses all along. I've always been happy. Everything has worked out beautifully. I mean, I can tell you lots and lots of times when you take a long story like that and compress it to 20, 25 minutes, I'm only touching the highlights. So for example, that time when my advisor basically said, I don't have funding. You can think about a change of advisors. I was really down. It's like, man, I've already been in grad school 4 years. Where am I going? What am I doing? This is kind of crazy, right? So it's not always simple. You're right. Sometimes, your work obligations and you don't find time to do your personal stuff. Spending time with people, spending time on other things you enjoy. You're right. So all of those are temporary. In the grand scheme of things, when you look at the integral your life journey, it mostly evens out. And if it doesn't even out, you hope you have friends around you or colleagues and mentors who say, what's going on? And I've actually had that. Actually, my friends back in the US, they actually joke with me. I'm actually working rather hard now. And they're like, what's happened to you? Why aren't you taking vacations like you used to? You've gone a little bit over the edge. And it's true. I am doing a fair amount of work. I have lots of things ideas I'm playing with. But it's nice that they remind me that, all of that is fine, but you do need to think about finding time for yourself. So sometimes you want to be able to do it yourself, but otherwise that's the benefit of having people around you with whom you have actually good enough relationship that they can actually tell you like it is, rather than always say, oh, everything is great, right? When things are not going great, they should tell you. So that's the long and the short. So, at any one point, if you look at a micro level, you may not be getting the balance right, but I think over the macro, hopefully it works out. Yeah. Yeah. Let me start with the back, and we'll come to, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said you should try out new stuff and take risks in your life. So doesn't that eventually lead to more and more choices? So how do you decide after that? Do you just take the path?
So are you saying choice is bad? You always want to have more choices. So think about that. Whatever, let's say you want to do a job after this, right? Let's say you want to go into some kind of a engineering job. Wouldn't you want to have choices of which job to take, right? Or you're trying to decide between staying in engineering and starting a social enterprise, or staying in engineering and getting a consulting job. You'd like to have those options. So I don't see choices and options as bad. The question is, how do you choose among them, right? I think that is a difficult, often becomes difficult unless you have a very clear internal compass. But there is other side to what you're saying, at least from my point of view. Choices are meaningful only if you think you want to exercise them, right? There is a cost to actually developing choices, right? Options are not costless. Developing options actually costs you something in terms of effort, energy, whatever time, whatever it might be. So you do have to be a little bit judicious in running after choices or trying to develop choices that are meaningful to you, right? I'll give you another example. There are students who come to me and say, I'm sitting for a day one job, even though I don't really think I want to do that, right? Why? Because actually it's for whatever reason, it's important to have a job at the end of the first day. So people end up investing time in trying to create that option, even though that option doesn't really necessarily excite them. To me, that actually is a bit troublesome, right? I think that is not the best use of people's time and energy. But spending time and energy in developing options that are meaningful to you, I absolutely think that's important. At least I feel I'd much rather have options than not have options. Yeah.
So somebody, yeah.
So you mentioned that about luck, that you are lucky enough to have mentors and peer groups, but it may be possible that a person is not lucky enough to have good mentor. For example, a supervisor or guide, for example, in case of a student. So how that person keeps going, and how should he select a mentor? What is the right way? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I do this always in my class because, okay. When I said I was lucky, I should say that it wasn't completely luck in the following way. For me, and actually this goes back to your balance question. For me, I've always chosen to work with people, and choices are important, by the way, for that, or had the luck to have choices to work with different people. And for me, in thinking about who to work with, it's trying to understand who that person is, right? So the first question I've always asked someone, if I'm thinking of working with someone, the first question I ask of people who work with them is he or she a nice guy? Are they nice people? Do they think about others, or is it only about themselves, right? Do they have, although many of my mentors have not had a perfect work-life balance, but they still do. Or do they at least appreciate other people around them having a work-life balance, right? So my advisor in grad school, for example, we had a very senior visitor from France visiting the lab. And we had a lab seminar around, somebody is presenting the lab, and this guy is here. And my advisor was introducing everyone. And you know how I introduced people? He said, here is Tim. He'll fly to Argentina for the weekend. Here is Deb. She loves going hiking. Here is Ambuj. He'll cycle down to the Cape, on a Sunday morning. He saw all of us, not only as researchers, but actually as people who had other interests, and in fact was proud of the fact. He was proud of the fact that people in his lab did all of these different things, right? So part of it is the kind of friends I gravitate to, or also friends who are that kind of people. So, these are choices one makes. These are choices one makes. Now, I have another example of somebody who actually was working in the lab of a Nobel laureate at MIT. And he told me, he told me, I went to work for this guy because he's Nobel laureate. But what this guy used to do was to really kind of push his students. I mean, he worked really hard himself and he really pushed his students. So it was a very productive lab, but it was also a very stressful lab, right? And he would always say, he'd be like, oh, you're so lucky to be working with a person who lets you actually have a work-life balance. And I told him it's not luck. Actually, when I was looking out for somebody, that was part of how I made a decision. But part of it is also what's important to you, right? That was important to me. So in some sense, I think the kind of people that I've had the chance to work with are people who are those kind of real, warm, human, thoughtful people, right? So when you work with people or you interact with people like that, that's how it works. I mean, those are the people I choose to spend time with as friends, right? Hanging out with people is not instrumental in that sense, right? You can't be, it's like, oh, I'm going to hang out with these people because it's going to advance my network. You may do that, but then those people may not turn out to be as nice as you want.
So, what motivated you to come back to India, and how is that experience working out for you?
Oh, that's a couple of different things. I think having some people around me who set a rather high example. A bunch of people I knew who had come back and were doing interesting things in India, engaging with India in different ways. I think that example and having those role models was helpful in pushing me to think about that. Partly, I think it was also some kind of evolution. It's not very clear to me how that happened, but some evolution in my thinking over time, which, by the way, partly was responsible for my moving into engineering, into policy. Policy actually is much more portable. I was an experimentalist. As an experimentalist, it's not easy to move around. Policy, you just need your mind. So you can move around a lot. So I knew with policy that I certainly kept the option. Remember, it's also about options, right? I kept the option of coming back to India open. And then I think eventually it really was just wanting to engage, wanting to make an impact in some way, and understanding that actually being back here, teaching, in fact, I was very clear, I really wanted to come back to an undergraduate institution because I wanted to engage with undergraduates. Although most of the other places I talked to were institutions with only graduate programs, right? The IITs really are the institutions that talk with undergraduate programs, and I chose an IIT because to me that was important part of why I thought I was coming back. But it's a chance, honestly, being back here is a chance to do some really interesting thinking, some very interesting work. So I don't at all think of this as any kind of a professional compromise. It's not at all. In fact, it's very fulfilling. It's frustrating in many ways, certainly. I don't think I can say that being at IIT is not full of frustrations of different kinds. I think every place is. But it's being back here is very fulfilling. So you're right, it was another very big decision. It took me a while to make that decision. But again, I've not regretted it at all. In fact, I should say, many of my friends back in the US when I moved back would ask me, do you have regrets in moving back? And truthfully, my answer to them was, actually, my only regret is that I didn't move back earlier, right? I'm actually having fun here, and so yeah. So I think in retrospect, it was absolutely the right thing to do. We're in the middle of it. It's a tough one because obviously, intellectually, professionally, I was in places that are good, very attractive and enticing in its own way. But one has to make a choice. Sometimes one does find that different things are interesting you at the same time, and part of it is making a choice, and part of it is passion. Oh, I'll tell you. Sorry, I'm going on for longer than I want, but an interesting story here. I was trying to decide when I was coming back, and I had a very interesting opportunity to stay on in the US. Really interesting opportunity, which, by the way, that opportunity appeared when I said I'm going to move back. Then they were like, wait a second, let's see what we can do to get you to stay here to do things you enjoy. And it was a tough decision then. And I was actually having lunch with a friend. And I said, he said, what's up? And I said, I'm trying to make this kind of a difficult decision because it's two rather attractive opportunities. So he said, tell me about them. So I told him the two things. And he said, I finished my little story, and he said, you're going to India. I said, I am. He said, yeah. He said, when you told me about the first opportunity, you described how exciting it is and how attractive it is and all of that. And he said, you start talking about the India things and your eyes lit up. He said, it's a different level of passion. And therefore, I have no doubt you're going to go back to India. Right? And I remember that story. He was absolutely right. In the end, the thought of coming back actually ignited a different level of passion in me. Right? It's not that I was not having fun there, intellectually, professionally, personally, in every way. But coming back here was a different kind of experience, different passion, different kind of impact. And so I think that did, in fact, I remember that conversation really did help, kind of stuck in my mind and did push me to come back. Yeah. Yeah.
How would you consider yourself a goal-oriented person or a process-oriented person? So what I mean by this is sometimes you have to make a choice between a goal that you require to do, but the process is not very good.
How about a disoriented person? It's true. It's actually true. I think it's very difficult to peg people as this, right? Am I a movie person or am I a food person? You know what the fact is? At some point you have to go after goals. At some point you have to go after process, and at some point you're messing up on both at the same time, right? So it's very difficult to say who I am. But I have to say, if I have to, not that I think I'm going to tell you what kind of person I am because I don't know, and I don't think of it really. I don't lie awake at bed thinking what kind of person am I, right? Partly because I'll tell you, it's not important. It's not important what kind of person you are. The question is, what do you want to do? The question is, who are you? What excites you? What is it you want to spend your time on? Those are the things that I do spend a lot of time thinking about that, right? What is it that I want to work? What do I want to spend my time on? Those are the questions that are really important to me. Who are the people that I actually want to collaborate with? Right? It's important for me. I have a fair number of opportunities for collaboration, and I have to decide who do I want to collaborate with. I do think about that, Is this a person with this going to be really fun collaboration? In fact, for me, eventually, I collaborate with friends, and my collaborators generally become my friends, right? And so for me, those kind of things, those kind of decisions, and those kind of questions are more important for me, trying to figure out how I want to spend my time, what direction I want to go on, right? So is it goal, is it process? I'm not really sure, right?
Because what I'm thinking, why I'm confused in this is that there are sometimes when a particular goal is exciting you, okay, but what you need to do to achieve that, you're a bit not sure about it, like you will like it or not. But there are some other options where whatever you are going to achieve, that may not excite you, but the whole journey of that, whole 2-3 years of that may excite you. And then what do you do to make that tough, difficult situation?
Okay, I think I see your point. I would think it's an unusual situation. I've tried to think of an example where that might be true, and I can't think of it on the fly. It would be an unusual situation where the journey is exciting, but the end point is not. I can see areas where the end point in principle might be exciting, but the journey is not. Yeah. I think it's really in that sense. That sense, to me, the journey is important. The journey is important because getting to something that really is exciting, but going through 3 years of hell to do that, it's not fun. And you're not even sure you're going to get that at the end, right? My God, you have some very bizarre exchanges with your friends. By the way, remember this. Also, remember the fact that is an interesting lesson here. Every conversation you have with your friends on social media is going to be archived for the rest of your lives. Anyway, so, first of all, that was a very long-winded statement by a friend. But let me start with the first thing. We're all beggars. I have to confess, I have to disagree with that, right? You are what you make of yourself. If you think you're a beggar, you are a beggar, right? It's unfortunate that the person is describing themselves as that, unless they are saying that you're a beggar until you've done what I've done, right? So whatever it is, the point is, everybody has options. When students come to me and say, I don't have options, I'm sorry, you guys always have options. It's a question of how much effort you spend, how much creativity you expend in trying to create an option, right? I know students who've had a low GPA who've gone out and created interesting options who are doing interesting things now, right? I know people who'd say, my life was a complete failure, and then I've completely turned it around by actually working damn hard at creating options. So this notion of life throws things at us, we just sit there as, with our jolies, waiting for things to fall in. It doesn't work that way. The reality is it just doesn't work that way. And so, again, goes back to the question of options. I think people should have options and people should try to create options for themselves, but options that are meaningful to them. And yes, part of it is engaging with the world. There's no doubt it's about engaging with the world. But I have to confess, I don't fully agree with that. The other thing I'll say is, students hear me saying a lot, it's very important in life to say what you want to do, and maybe you can communicate this to your friend, with the smallest number of words. Brevity is important. Actually, that long-winded thing, I'm not even sure what that person eventually was trying to say. So the reality is, if he was trying to say, somebody's a beggar in this interaction, you or him, I think it's an incomplete representation of the possibilities open to certainly IIT students, but not just IIT students, right? I'll tell you, I am constantly flooded with resumes of people from all kinds of backgrounds who are trying to create options for themselves, right? Can I come and spend some time with you? If I can't spend time with you, can we have a conversation about how I might work forward? The reality is people are very motivated to try to better themselves, to come up with new opportunities. I'm always very heartened by that. I'm sorry, sometimes I cannot spend enough time with many of these people as I'd like to, but I'll tell you, it's unbelievable. Students from small colleges, students from here, students, actually international people, wanting to have a conversation. I want to work on, questions relating to India. Can we have a conversation about what to do? Can I, come and spend some time working, with people or you or whatever. So the reality is, a lot of people are trying to create opportunities, and they should. And so I would actually hope that at least for you and whoever else is, your friends who are having these kind of conversations, I think take a little bit more positive view of yourself, right? Otherwise you're shortchanging yourselves.
But Ambuj, I don't think that's what she was trying to solve.
Yeah.
I think what she said, in certain field, let's say you like something A, and so initially you have to struggle, and some of the things, any job, you want to be there, and I think that process might, and you're very sure. For instance, acting as a big
Yeah.
example. So all big stars, initially they struggle, and the struggle could be 10 years. They became big stars. Initially they feel like there is compromises they make, but they are very sure. I think that's what she is referring to her friend. Maybe he's pretty sure, but this initial period can be disorienting, and because you have to be there, you want to be there, but this how to do, and then
It's true. So it may be. That may be, I don't know if that's what the exchange is about, but let's take this case. It may well be the case. It may well be that you want to move towards something, and it's a lot of hard work in the beginning. A lot of risk, a lot of heartburn.
limited choices, you don't have much leeway to go around.
But that's okay. But you made a choice to go down that pathway, hopefully, right?
Yes.
Hopefully you weren't forced to go down that pathway. So once you made the choice, then you have to actually, and you're passionate about that, or you're enjoying it, or whatever reason you made the choice, then fine, then you go with it, right? So I know friends who are entrepreneurs who are working like mad hours, right? Really like crazy hours. I would never do that. I mean, I would not want to work like that, right? But for them, there's a joy to it. It's something for me that's pain is joy to them. And so, I think so this question of, now if somebody else is telling you to do something that you're not enjoying because you want to get somewhere because, you think the journey is going to be fun a little bit later on, yeah, maybe you take a risk, right? For some time you say, fine, I'm going to try it, and maybe it doesn't work out, right? But, the reality is, I don't think I can give an algorithm, or anybody can give an algorithm by which you get a nice high probability of getting a great journey all along, right? I started by saying that I don't have those answers for myself, right? I really don't. When I look back at my life, it's a series of steps. Chance has played a role, some thinking has played a role. I've learned over time, and so in some sense, people do have to make those choices themselves. If somebody is somewhere where it's really so painful, even though the end points may be worthwhile, they have to think, what does this mean for them? And what works for one person, the compromise or the balance that works for one person may not work for the other. So that's, in the end, it's about yourself, right? And what's meaningful to you, what's how important to you, and all of that. Okay? Sorry, there's a couple of hands there, and then we'll come here. Yeah.
Starting from this background, so I'm working in IT industry from last 4 years, right? So, but being clueless about my future and my interest, and explore new things, I landed into this IIT, so doing this part-time MBA, right, parallel MBA, and I'm still clueless about my future. So my question is, most of the things you have already answered. So the question is, how good is the idea to have diversified things in your profile, and how good is to focus on exploring the things that interest you, or to focus on something that market demands and work on that to be successful in that thing?
I'd say a couple of things here. I think diversity is good if you're learning something from it. But diversity for the sake of diversity, I don't think is helpful.
Exploring things, you have to take chances or explore new things. And
But
these things are adding.
the question is why? When you're coming to the question of market, what the market demands, you can't predict the market. How do you know what the market will really demand? Yeah, so I'm a great believer in following your interests and following your passions. Let me tell you, when I started working in biomedical area, the market didn't think, oh, that's a really hot area, right? I just thought it was interesting and fun. When I moved into policy, it's because it interested me. It wasn't that, is policy going to be really a great thing out there 20 years into the future, and that to market is demand, and what, in the end, you are not able to predict the market in the long term, right? But one thing I can certainly tell you, when students send me CVs, and the CVs are full of activities, I have to wonder what this person's about. Are they constantly trying to build their resume because somebody's told them at one point diversity is important, or lines on your resume are important? I'd much rather engage with a student that's at 2 or 3 really meaningful experiences than 10 meaningless experiences, or potentially meaningless experiences. I don't know a priori, right? But so diversity cannot be an end in itself to me, right? It's like, by the way, it's the same when people say, I want to be an entrepreneur. It's like, what does that mean, right? You can't aspire for things in and of themselves. Remember, entrepreneurship is a way to address a problem. People want to address a problem and they say the best way to do it is by being an entrepreneur. But you can't say I want to be an entrepreneur, right? The same way you can't say I want to have diversity, right? If there's a reason to do that, fine. But if there's no reason, or if you're doing it because you think diversity is an end in itself, I think I would be a little bit careful about thinking in those terms.
It can be meaningful for me to explore, but it is meaningless to you, who is
That's
on the
absolutely,
other side.
that's fine. But then, but that's fine. But then when you engage with me, you'll persuade me as to why it's meaningful. That's right. If you can do that, fantastic. And if you're really passionate about it, you will. You will. But you have to be able to persuade the person that this is not just a random assortment of things that you've been engaging in. As long as you're able to do that, absolutely. So, yeah, oh wow, bunch of people.
Describe yourself in 3 words when you were 20.
3 words when I was 20. I have to remember. You know what? It's that same kind of thing. I have no idea what I was like when I was 20. I'll tell you, what you think you were and what you were are two very different things. Right? Truly. I mean, I'll go back to this. I thought I was clued in. I'll tell you, I thought I was clued in. I barely sat for it was cold day in hell before I would take CAT, right? I said, I have no interest in that. So I knocked that out completely. Everybody was taking the CAT. And then for the industry things, I really had no particular interest. People said, Kuch to kar lo. I said, well, I'm kind of interested in, at that time there really was nothing on automobiles. So I interviewed with the Hindustan Aeronautics, right? But I can tell you, I had really no particular interest in that. I thought I knew exactly what I wanted to do, right? As I just said, 3 months after landing in the US, I realized I was wrong. And every 6 months or every year, I realized I was wrong about what I thought I wanted, right? I'm serious. I actually changed my thesis topic effectively more or less once a year. I'm serious. I mean, I went through like 5 different thesis topics, right? So when at 20, I thought I was clued in. By the time I was 25, I realized I was completely wrong. I had not even started thinking about what really excited me, what I enjoyed, what I was about, what I wanted to spend my life on. It took me a long time to do that, by the way. It took me a long time to sort through that, right? So luckily I was in grad school. You can be patient, you can stay there forever. Yes, I was joking with my advisor when he finally said, you should just write your thesis and get out. I actually joked with him. I said, I thought I could get tenure as a student. And he said, no, it doesn't work that way. But, but the reality is it took me a while to try to sort through these different things and figure out what direction I was moving in. So, at 20, whatever I thought I was is actually irrelevant because I can tell you pretty much all of it was wrong. And I'll tell you, I'll guarantee for most of you, 10 years from now, you're going to look back at things that you thought were really important to you, and you're going to say, did I really think that was that important? I think for many of you, when you look back, the answers will change. But that's part of growing up, right? That's part of evolving. And by the way, that's a word I did want to kind of make sure I put in. I think evolution, it's the flip side of learning. As you learn, you evolve, right? Nobody who learns doesn't evolve, right? And so you evolve, you change over time. And things that seem really important to you at one point don't seem that important, right? So in the end, I think I would say don't worry about how you define yourself now. I think the question, again, I'll come back to that. It's not an easy question, and it's not an easy question certainly at this age. Trying to figure out what is it really excites you. What is it that you want to actually be passionate about? At least it may be that your passion changed, but even at this age, chase your passion. Try to figure out what's really motivating you, what you really want to work on. these words are effectively on how you peg people in is impossible. People have multiple identities. I like music, I like socializing, I like working on social problems, I like to do this, I like to do that. I mean, how do I define who I am? What 3 words? I mean, how can you take somebody's complex existence and boil it down to 3 words? I think it's very difficult. But it's also, I think it's an exercise that may almost be counterproductive, right? Because you are trying to peg yourself into something that narrows who you are. At least that's how I think. Yeah. So, all right, you've had your hand up for a long time.
So you talked about frustrations. So you've had frustrations of being a student at IIT and a professor at IIT. What are the differences? What are the frustrations?
Yeah, I think I'll tell you, there's a commonality between them, which is the following. I think this is an institute that has actually great potential. For whatever reasons, I think we've not really been able to live up to that promise. I look back at my times as an undergraduate here, and I have to say, while I had a lot of fun here, I really did. I had a great time here. I made some great friends. I actually even enjoyed a lot of the engineering courses. Not all, but a lot of the engineering courses. In retrospect, I think I could have got much more out of this place. I mean, I went to places where I saw people getting much more out of their undergrad programs, right? And now, having had the benefit of being in places that actually do have great teaching and research programs, and coming here, I again see that we could actually be doing more. And the frustration is that we are not. Having said that, sometimes it's because of us, the way we are organized as an institute. Sometimes it's the broader environment. We are an institute that, it's a tough. I mean, it's in a country with very limited resources, and so on. It's tough to be a great institute, and many other reasons. But I think that, to me, that's the biggest frustration, that there's a gap between what we could be and what we are, what kind of experience we could be giving and what we do,
and
right?
How do you suggest can we try to reduce that gap? It's a huge question. I mean, look, it's transforming institutions takes a long time, right? Really changing experiences. A lot of it is about culture, right? These kind of evolutions and transformations of institutions takes a while. Can we do things? Absolutely, we can do things. I mean, you can make, in a sense, engage with problems better, right? Start having fun in classes. Think of classes as a fun and a place of learning, and maybe a place where you're searching for meaning with your friends, in conversations with faculty and all of that, right? I certainly didn't do enough of that as a student. I was actually, maybe again, if you have to think of a word, I talk about the fact that the most clueless people who are so clueless they don't even know they were clueless, right? And I was one of them, right? I just didn't think enough about these things, right? So I thought I knew everything, but I really didn't. And I was so beyond that, right? So part of it is, at least I think maybe, and you have the benefit of the internet and all of that, right? So I think you have information, role models, ideas, all of that. So I think, and you guys, by the way, a lot of you do very, very interesting things. So I think already the student experience is way richer than when I was a student. There's no doubt about that. Can it be better? Absolutely. Can IIT do more to make it better? Absolutely. Can you do more to make it better? Absolutely. Right? But I think there's, again, no simple answers here. What can we faculty members do to make IIT better? I think we can do a lot, both as individual faculty members, but also institutionally, and thinking about how to transform this institution into a greater institution. And there are some conversations along those lines. I think there are some conversations. I think people are beginning to say that we should be a better institution. So hopefully, 10 years from now, if you're having this same conversations happening, we'll be able to actually say things have improved significantly, right? And that would be fantastic. And that's, by the way, that's what a lot of people here
certainly a lot of the faculty here would very much, that's why they are here, to engage in this process of change, right? To engage in this process of how to make this a better institution. Most of the faculty members here are very passionate about that. Right? So I think for me, it's a very exciting time to be at IIT. Yeah.
So you talked about how we should take our passion, and I completely agree, but often enough, pragmatism catches up, right? For example, here in IIT, in our second year, our third year, or fourth year, our peers come to us, our seniors come to us, our parents, everyone, and they're like, okay, you've had your fun, now decide what you want. And no offense, it took you years of graduate to finally realize what excites you, and we really have 2 years of undergrad, 3 years of undergrad experience.
Yeah.
So we haven't developed a passion yet. We do have a couple of inclinations, but then again, pragmatism. This field has a particular output, and this doesn't. So how do you?
But tell me.
That pressure actually, makes you question.
You're right. You're right. Actually, in fact, I've had this conversation with many of my friends and my faculty colleagues. It's very strange. It's very strange in that somehow we've gone down this particular pathway where it's actually a real problem, where everybody has an opinion on what somebody else should be doing. Right? It really is amazing. I actually don't think we talked about what is the right way forward. I was very lucky. My parents really were reasonably hands-off. My friends certainly didn't have an opinion on what I should be doing. The same way I didn't have an opinion on what they should be doing. Really, everybody, it wasn't that judgmental about even say I wasn't taking the cat. Some of my best friends were, and I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. And certainly there was no societal thing that this is the right thing to do, wrong thing to do. But I do feel right now that it's a constant barrage of people being told what's the right thing to do. It's at every level. Whether it's in hostels, whether it's in departments, whether it's faculty-student conversations, whether it's people telling IIT what IIT should be doing, people in society telling everybody what each other should be doing. It's a tough thing. I can tell you so many students who come to me and chat with me, a lot of them do, I think are very, very troubled by this. It's balancing these pressures. Family saying exactly, now you should do this. And I really honestly, I don't have an answer to this. The closest answer that I think that sustains me is the one that I gave to a student who really many years ago wanted to do, was a computer science student. I really liked computer science. And his father kept on telling him, do an MBA. Very smart student. And he would come and talk to me, multiple conversations. What should I do? How should I move forward? And people who come to my office know that the one thing they never get from me is an answer of that kind, what I should do. They always go, you can ask people, they often go with more questions than they come with. But that's okay. I think it's to get them to think a little bit and come to the answer themselves. But he would keep on coming to me. And I think the fourth or fifth visit at some point, I was in the middle of something and he showed up again and asked this question. And I think I was a little bit impatient with him, should I say. And I said, look, we've already had this conversation multiple times. We're just going round and round. The reality is it's your decision. I can't make that decision for you. As I said, as I see it, you have two choices. You can make your father happy. Choice one, you're making your father happy, and your father wants you to be happy. So you're actually making a choice that your father thinks is going to make you happy, and you're making your father happy in that. There's some probability that your father's right, and there's some probability your father's wrong, right? You're making another choice that you think is going to make you happy. There's some probability you're right, some probability you're wrong, right? But the reality is, I can tell you, if you make yourself happy, it's a certainty that your father will be happy. But if you make your father happy, think about the probability of how you might be unhappy, right? If you see what I'm saying, right? So you can try to make other people happy, but there's a reasonable likelihood that you will not be happy then, right? And I'll tell you, actually the guy went away and then he came back a few days later and he says, I'm doing computer science. I've decided. He said that was it. He absolutely, he said, maybe it was a nudge of some kind, maybe the fact that I kind of just laid it out like that, and he just went back and said, you know what, I really have to make myself happy. But I am a real big believer in that. As I said at some point, you cannot be just keeping multiple people happy or your parents happy. In the end, your parents want you to be happy, right? Parents think the best for their kids. They think, security is important and therefore you should be making money. Or security is important and therefore you should have a very professionally, successful career. The reality is it doesn't work that way. And I'll mention another student actually who wanted to do I think had very, very nice offers, but wanted to go and teach kids, right? And he, again, family questions, why, what are you doing, this, that. Cut a long story short, he actually ended up doing what he really wanted to do. And I'll tell you, I not only was that kid really happy, or I guess I shouldn't say kid, grown up adult. Not only was he happy, I remember talking to his father, and his father said, I went and actually saw what he actually did, right, and what he's doing, and I can tell you, I'm now completely convinced he did the right thing. He said, I'm really proud that he ended up making the right choice, right? So in some sense, in the end, you have to figure out what you're about and have the strength to stand behind that. And whatever it is, whether your parents, whoever is telling you that, say, thank you, that's very helpful. I understand you mean the best for me, but actually this is what I want to do. But then have the courage to do it, right? Are you going to be completely right? No. Maybe things don't pan out the way you want, but that's life, right? Once you made a choice, you have to stand behind it. Yeah. Hang, let me go to somebody in the back who hasn't asked a question yet. Absolutely. Great. Happy birthday. That's great. See, now talk about good friends. But no question, that's it. That's all you came here for. I see, all right. Yeah, all right. Yeah, sure.
It is off the topic. Just I recently came about a news which talked about Rajan's, the Reserve Bank of India's governor. His ex-teacher was working in tribal areas, and the name of the professor was Professor Ambuj Sagar. So first thing I want to confirm, is he your real brother? Then I will ask the next question.
As opposed to what kind of brother?
Because from the surname, I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
I was guessing. The question I want to ask is, I read the whole article, and I read that he left. He was a professor. He went to US. And he was having a good career. He started to work in tribal areas. Because you both come from the same family, you are brothers. You chose a life for being the teacher, and he was already a teacher, and when you were teaching and already contributing to society. What made him leave that teaching and go back to tribals and work there? So the difference in the same family, I guess, that gave to the family.
Yeah, but the reality is everybody has to find their own way. That's meaningful to them. I mean, that's the point. I mean, this question of diversity, of everybody. This is the beauty of life, right? People make different choices, and different things are meaningful to different people.
But one thing, he was living an ideal life. So
No, sorry.
How is balancing his family life then?
Are you telling me? So are you saying that people who come from the same background should do the same things?
No. My question is that you talked about you can maintain the balance. That thing is giving him peace. So, but the way the life is living might be giving him peace. But is he able to maintain the family balance also with that life?
You know, everybody does things that are meaningful to them. I mean, all I'm saying is, as long as people are happy doing what they're doing, and they found the balance that works for them, you know what I'm saying? It's about finding the balance that works for you, not the balance that works for the other person. Right? Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, you can learn lessons from other people, but in the end, you have to make your own choices. Right? I mean, that's the point I was saying. I can't tell people what to do, right, wrong, this, that. I've had a certain life. I think that life has given me some lessons. Maybe I can share some of those lessons with you, but in the end, you guys have to use those lessons and your other experiences and then build your own life, right? In a way that makes sense for you. It may not make sense for you, right? For me, what you end up doing, but as long as it's meaningful to you, that's what matters, right? So I think that's I really am a big believer in that. Yes, he is my brother. Yes. But yeah. So it's it is a different pathway. Yeah.
Yes, so you said that you work in policy. What exactly is the aim of working in policy? What is policy aim in the end?
Maybe that's a conversation we have offline. I mean, I think this is a different conversation. So I think maybe not everybody's interested in that question, but I'm happy to talk afterwards. Huh?
I'll ask a different question later.
Okay.
See,
so that everybody's here for a particular reason.
So suppose some person is making a personal choice. Now, there is a general perception of the choice which relates to survival. Like, for example, here it may be job security or something. Or for poor people, it may be a good any job or whatever, basic needs. Okay, and there is some higher purpose. For example, if you are working for the environment, you want people not to return, such things, right? And they may be in conflict with the survival thing. So, how do you convince people to do that?
How's that? Tell me, what's the conflict? You think people who work, let's say for the environment, if it's passionate to them, do you think they don't get food to eat? I mean, survival is a very strong word. Right? Look, so the fact is, I think it's difficult to look at life in these binaries. Survival or something high purpose. That's a word used, so I'd say, I think people can actually do both. And high purpose is not high purpose as viewed by others, it's high purpose or whatever that's meaningful to you for yourself. Right? And I do not think, I cannot imagine that there's a single person in this room who's going to have to worry about their survival. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen that 10 years from now you're going to say, you know what, Ambuj, you were wrong. I actually don't have money to eat food. And I'm just like living on the streets and I think it's a very low probability that any of you will be in that. If not, difficult for me is zero because that's a very absolute statement. But I wouldn't bet on that, right? So stop worrying about survival.
It's not about us. It's about. I'm saying that you're talking to IITs, like for example, undergraduates. They've slogged for usually for 2 years to get to IIT.
Yeah.
Right. So they've compromised on their interests and such like and
Okay.
get to IIT. So they've technically given up their passion or something, right? And whatever they were doing before, they may continue it. I'm not saying they will not continue it or they just give it up, but still it's like something which people do for to get an opportunity or to do so it is not completely in the free way that you were saying that.
No, but if you gave up all your passions to come to IIT, it's a tough thing, right? I hope that's not the case. I hope there was some passion about engineering, right? And so I'm not trying to be dismissive of what you're saying. I think you're painting maybe a little bit more dire picture. I don't think, I'm hoping that there was some interest in in what you thought you could do after you came here. There were some passions you might have put aside, maybe it's music, painting, whatever it might be, but there's always place to pick up on that. And this friend of yours who was asking this work-life balance is to find some kind of balance. But after that, I mean, my question is more once, and it relates to what you do here, but also what you do outside. And how do you find something that is meaningful to you? And I cannot imagine if you're doing something that's meaningful to you, that survival is going to be an issue. Right? Now, you may define survival as having, I don't know, having a big penthouse apartment in Manhattan. Right? But my point is, if you define your survival at a particular level, then you're painting yourself into a corner. But as long as you're saying, I want a reasonable life, all of you are going to have a reasonable life. There's no doubt about that. You're all talented, smart people. Why would you not have? I don't doubt for a minute that you're not going to have a materially good life. Right? And if that excites you, that's fine. But I think many people, including yourself, might want something a little bit more than that. And I think push yourself a little bit more. And instead of these stark choices, the thing is, the world is not so black and white. Yeah.
Sir,
in the back. Sorry.
Can I just summarize this line by saying that we don't have to worry about the material thing we follow, we just have to follow the passion?
Yeah, I would say that. I think if you follow your passion, actually, in fact, I tell that to students very often, right? If you follow what your interests, you will do well in life, right? If you say, I want to do well in life, you start with that end point, that goals versus process that somebody was asking about. If you say, I want to do well, I don't know if I can tell you how to do well, right? I mean, there is no single formula for doing well, and it's maybe very risky. And if you're not even having fun along the way, at least when you're having passion, you're having fun along the way, and because you're excited about it, and passion, I'm using it a very kind of broad way, right? And if you're having fun along the way, you're probably going to do well at it, right? So I actually do think that if you are following your interests and are really excited about things, those other things are going to get sorted out. Yeah, you had a question.
Rather than I wanted to make a comment that people who are present here, they must have got a lot of good life lessons. But I do believe when they will be leaving this room, they will also be having good parenting lessons. So, do you really think that this sort of a talk should also be given to the people and the parents who will be coming in to get their kids enrolled in future?
Yeah, it's a very serious question. I have to tell you, I have actually said that to some of my students who are having trouble, that in fact, not only that, I've actually talked to the parents of some of my students. And I really not the kind of person who like to tell people what to do. But sometimes I have to confess, I've had to tell parents, can you just give this person a little bit of space, right? I'll give you another example of a parent who was very concerned about their daughter and kind of life decisions that she would make and so on. And it's a very accomplished girl, very accomplished woman, actually, was in graduate school in the US. And I said to him, and he was also a technical person, I said to him, do you call up your daughter and tell her what kind of experiments to run? He said, no, she's doing a PhD at this really good university. Why would I be able to tell her what experiments to run? So I said, so you trust her then to actually run the right experiments? And he's like, absolutely, she's a bright kid. And I said, but then you don't trust her to actually make decisions about her life. I said, it's not computing to me, is it? It was not an easy conversation, right? I don't know what happened at the end of that. Actually, beyond that, whatever, but sometimes I think parents, although they mean well, I think sometimes one has to do that. That's not my job, actually. Honestly, my job is not to be having conversation with parents, but sometimes I do think that for students to fulfill themselves, to go down the path they really want to go, parents, while being well-meaning, do kind of, end up having strong opinions. And I don't think they understand sometimes how those opinions really kind of shape decisions that their kids are making. And I think it's a bit unfortunate. I think you have to trust people to make their decisions. Will everything go right? Never. But there's no guarantee of that in life anyway, right? And everybody has to make their mistakes. I always say people learn from their mistakes, very difficult to learn from somebody else's mistakes. It's actually your own mistakes that you learn from, and therefore mistakes are a natural part of any journey, right? And I think it will be good if parents also kind of do that more. I mean, and by the way, I'm not, I think most parents here are absolutely very supportive parents. I'm sure about that. It's just that I think it's this whole pressure in society. I think the word used was pragmatic, security, and all of that. It's just, it's these overwhelming, overbearing sentiments that really constrain options. And it's a really difficult, I think it puts people in a very difficult position. So, yeah, over there, actually, come back.
If what we think is a passion, we think that this is a passion, and we know intuitively that we are not going to do this. For example, in all those changes in the PhD topics you did, if you knew that this topic is not going to take me again, but would you do it just for the journey so that you can arrive at the next topic?
No, I did it not just for the journey to arrive at the next topic. At that instant at which I was thinking, I thought I wanted to do that. That was it. For me, that was what really I wanted to do. So it just happened that my interest changed. But wasn't that, this is just a journey and then I'm going to do something else?
No, for example, for my case, intuitively I know that what I am passionate about right now, I would not be doing it 2 years later. I just had that feeling. So,
but why? Why do you think you're passionate about something, but you may not be passionate about it 2 years later?
Or sir, can I? How do you distinguish between interest and passion? So you might be interested in certain things, so you have a certain or a certain flick of that. Okay, this is something that interests me.
No, I mean, okay. So I think let's use the word sustained interest, right? And some deep interest. I mean, deep interest and passion have strong overlap, right? So I mean, it's difficult for me to again think about a situation where I have a really deep interest, and I say I have a deep interest in something, but 2 days later that deep interest may not exist. I mean, then is it really deep? Right? So so my point only is, I think you have to ask yourself this question: why would I be in a situation where there's something that I think I like, but I may not like 2 days later? The chances are you probably don't really like it that much. If it's something that you really, really like, you are going to think that that's, so as I said, for me, every time I went down a particular pathway, I wasn't thinking this is a placeholder till I do something else. At least for me at that instant, this was something I really wanted to do. Having said that, turned out I was wrong. Not that I didn't want to do that, something else that also was exciting came along. Right? And then sometimes one has to make choices. So I think maybe let's do one last one. Yeah?
Sometimes I feel that I'm nowhere, maybe in terms of my life is heading or where I am right now. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing or just part of growing up.
So, sorry, repeat that. You're not sure? No, I want to, yeah.
I'm just not, I was saying that I still feel that I'm nowhere in terms of where my life is heading, or I'm not sure about what to do.
Yeah, but in terms of thinking about that, I don't have any simple answer to that. The only thing I would say is finding something that in the end that you end up becoming interested in, that tells you what direction you might go in, and the only way to do that is through exploration, right? It's not that your life is going nowhere. You're not sure which direction it's heading in. That's a different thing from going nowhere, right? you're not just sure which path you're going in. And at this age, in any case, the reality is it's almost natural to be confused, right? I mean, it's happens to a lot of people. So being a little bit confused or quite confused about which direction you're going to head in and where you're going to head up, I actually don't think that's very that's something that is something that should concern you a lot. I think but the way to respond to that, I would suggest, is trying to figure out of the various directions that you might want to think about, or other people that you know are thinking about, what are the ones that you might want to head down. You are going to have to make some choices. You are going to have to make some choices, and again, those choices are going to come only from you, right? So the question is, how do you explore those choices? I mean, I know it sounds a little bit vague, but certainly I would not think of your situation as being a bleak situation like going nowhere, right? But remember, all of you have options. You actually have multiple options, and you will have multiple options. Your job is going to be saying, which are the options that I really want to pursue, I really want to create, I really want to go after, right? It's not the fact that you're going to be optionless, right? A person who's going nowhere is a person who really has no options. Yeah. So let's just one thing. I just found out Gotham is a dropout by choice. I mean, okay, it's okay. No. No, let be this. No, I think okay. We should wrap this up very soon. I think people need to leave and all of that. So let's do two very quick ones, because that's the last two.
One thing that relates to the previous question, the sentiment about beggars not being choosers, and the other thing, so the feeling of being optionless, they both come from the fact that as IIT, we've always been told that we can achieve the world and we can achieve everything with more brilliant creatures ever created. So as soon as you feel the reality of flying somewhere, doing things which actually reject you or put you in a
you know what, I think it's an important point, and I should have thought about this. I should have mentioned this. I think it's a question of patience. I have no doubt a lot of you can do a lot, but it's not going to be by the time you're 23. It actually takes time. It takes time. The reality is, for everybody, all the role models that you can think about, that you guys think about, whatever, whoever did something interesting, something substantial, it took time. I think the one thing that I hear a lot of people actually want to do stuff and want to do it by tomorrow, right? And the reality is, it actually takes time. So, you know, this notion of some frustration about I'm not able to achieve as much as I was told I could achieve is coming from a kind of a real sense of impatience. And I think that impatience actually sometimes, I get the feeling, make people take choices that don't necessarily make that much sense, because they really want to be able to be doing something in a short time. Doing something in a short time is more important than actually trying to figure out what you really want to do, right? So it's a sense, it's an illusion of progress or the illusion of achievement. But in the way, you know, again, I certainly feel that life is a long game, right? Few years here and there doesn't really matter. I mean, and you know that. I mean, I've had this conversation with you and many other people. Few years here and there doesn't matter. Yes, are you achieving as much as your classmates? On paper, no. But does that matter, right? Does that matter who achieves success, whatever success might be first? It's not a race, right? It's a way of moving forward on your pace, on your path, on your time frame, and eventually that's what's important. And this notion of really this needing to do it here and now, I think in a sense does push for sometimes problematic outcomes. Or I think people who see those outcomes as being problematic retrospectively. Yeah.
So how do you define your success? Let's say that you have some experiences or goals that if you will complete all of them, then you will think that your life is a success, like the ultimate aim.
You know, I don't spend too much time on these definitions. I really don't. I don't think it's very helpful. Even my understanding of what success is changes over time. Or success is in what makes me happy or what brings me joy or what gives me satisfaction has changed over time, right? So I don't really think that much about how do I define success for myself. I mean, really, part of it is about the journey. I'm having fun. I have good conversations, good ideas, interesting things going forward, absolutely. Again, yes, I do want to have impact. Yes, I do want to say that I've done something interesting with my life. So if that's how you think about success, yes, I do think about that.
So that you are still up for exploring new things and new areas, or you are settled on?
No, I told earlier, I said I don't know what I might be doing 5 years from now. Actually, some of the areas I'm working on today are not what I thought I was going to be working on when I joined IIT 8-9 years ago. I can tell you with full confidence that I do not know what I'm going to be working on 5 years from now. I have some idea of some things will continue, but I may be doing something new, and that's fine. And it'll be partly motivated by something that interests me, something that excites me, something that I think is going to be meaningful to me, something that actually is going to help me create some kind of impact. I enjoy that. I feel good about saying I've engaged with the world and maybe contributed to it in some way, and so in some sense that's how I define success. Yeah. So, there is more question. Yeah, I don't think many of you have a fear of failure. I see many of you doing really bold things. Certainly bolder than things that I did when I was a student and many of my friends did when we were students. So I actually would not say that you people have a fear of failure, or most of you have fear of failure. Some of you, yes, I think fear of failure is natural, but in some sense, it's nothing ventured, nothing gained. You can be very risk averse, very conservative, and yes, it'll be fine. And if that's fine with you, that's okay. But if you want to do things that are a little bit different, or if you want to do things that may require taking a risk, I think you're going to have to do it. But a lot of people I do see do that. So there may be a fear of risk, but certainly a lot of you are actually taking risk. Is everybody? Probably not. Could more? Probably yes. But I think you're also, by the way, I think, and we've talked about this, and I know I've talked about it with some other students, I think role models also work, right? Somebody who actually takes a risk, he or she then becomes role model for people after them, right? This person took this risk, it actually turned out interesting. Hey, maybe, risk is not so bad. Maybe it's not so risky, and so on and so forth, right? But that's why I do think it's important to be learning. You have to do thinking for yourself, but it's important to be learning from other people. People who've gone this path before you, people who are gone this path well before you, people who are doing it right ahead of you, and sometimes even people who are, younger than you, doing interesting things. So, all right, I think it's been a long conversation, interesting interaction. So I think thanks guys.
Yeah, so super exciting, super interesting conversations. Thanks a lot, Professor.
Pleasure.
So a couple of points. Firstly, so it's going to be a continuous thing, the first conversation, and we would really love to have feedback from you guys. So we'll float mails on ITT notices, but please like the page Board for Student Publications IIT Delhi, because that's where we're going to float the survey, the feedback, and especially suggest us who would be the next professor you would want to start a conversation with, right? And I hope that this actually broke some ice between not just Professor Sagar, and this gave you a little picture that you can actually go ahead and converse with people, with professors who really look like they're like nerds.
Sorry. Hi everyone, I'll just write the link. This form will be uploaded by tonight, so you can share everything by tonight. I'll just write that.
Yes. So while he's writing the mail, so now I would like to invite Divanshu, who is literary club secretary, and Kana Batra, who is chief editor in Board for Student Publication, to express our gratitude to Professor Ambuj Sagar with like some flowers.
This is the